Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the in-game best in slot crystal setups. There is quite a few options, both if you want to make like a PvE focus, a balance build, or pure PvP. We're going to take a look at pretty much all of those, both for DR and Evasion. Let's get into it. First off, if you don't have a Gum of Heart, I would suggest picking one of the crystal setups that is using AARK crystals in your Awakening Weapon or Orlucus crystals, and use one of those and then just don't use those crystals. That will also work if you only have a Karanda Heart for your Awakening Weapon, but this is an end-game best in slot crystal setup, so we assume you got it all. Alright, let's jump into it. The first one here is a pure PvE setup. Now, for PvE, adamantite crystals I find are extremely important for pretty much any class. Mobs, the main CC they got is a knockdown, and getting a knockdown in PvE not only means that you're going to take a lot of damage, but it also means you are not dealing damage. So making sure you don't get CC'd, it will increase your clear speed quite a lot. So in my opinion, these are mandatory for PvE setups. Now the rest of the gems, we're going to go with Hooms and Helmet and Hooms in Chest. This one here is the one that's like very heavy into the PvE setup, and you'll see that in all the PvP builds afterwards. For gloves, Gin Vipers, they're just going to be the best. We're going to use these in every single setup of our gearing. And for PvE, it goes for all the builds with the DR. You're going to see the PvP builds are using a Nuver, but you should always have a Kudum in a DR build for PvE, and you should pretty much always use Corrupted Crystal in your Kudum for PvE. Now, your Awakening Weapon, we're going to be running the glorious AARK crystals. They are by far the best crystals for PvE damage. If you can't get the glorious crystals, normal AARK crystals will be okay as well for a pure PvE focused build. Your main hand weapon is going to be LCARs, and you'll see LCARs in every single one of these builds as well. Next up is the Cookie Cutter PvP build. And again, LCARs, no surprise there. I use Adamantite in the Cookie Cutter build as well. It's just a super good crystal, and knockdown is the most potent CC in PvP. It doesn't allow you to use V if you get knocked down, and it also lasts a bit longer than bounce and stiffens and etc. etc. So it is the most powerful CC to get hit by, and therefore having resistance against it is very strong. In the helmet, we're going to go with Hooms, and in chest, we're going to go with Special Evasion. This is by far the best PvP survivability gem. So I definitely advise you to get those. If you can't get the glorious, you can just use normal blue crystal evasion gems. Perfectly fine as well. Again, Vipers here. And for your newer rebellious crystals, criminally underrated crystal, it is super good, lots of HP, great survivability, and also 5 AP on top of it all. And then for PvP crystals, the best one you can get is the glorious Orlucus crystal. It is just an absolute must-have. Put bits in and see if you can snipe it on the marketplace if you can't make it yourself. If you don't have Orlucus crystals, what you're going to be looking for in your PvP build is using Hand Hooms in your Awakening Weapon, and then you want to run Hand Hooms in your helmet as well. That's going to give you the foresight bonus. Still using Adamantites, Evasion in chest, Vipers in gloves, Rebellious in offhand, and of course LCARs in your main hand. Some builds, classes, etc. don't need or don't want to run Adamantites in boots, so I made some builds for those as well. If you are not running Adamantites in boots, Hooms is the way to go, and that gives you the foresight bonus running them in boots and helmet. Of course, still Evasion in chest, Vipers in gloves, Rebellious in offhand, Orlucus in Awakening, and LCARs in main hand. There's another pretty great setup you can run, and that is the Ignore Resistance setup. Now, this is actually the setup I'm running right now. I have previously run the No Orlucus and the general PvP setup. Try them all out, see what suits you best. But this is the one I'm personally running right now. Adamantines in boots and red battlefield harpiers in helmet. Now, this is going to be an ignore resistance setup. So by going ignore resistance, you are prioritizing damage and offensive pressure. So you could go with a more survivable gem like Hooms in your helmet, but I find that when you're already prioritizing offensive pressure, getting a bit more offensive pressure is probably the right way to go. So that's why I would suggest running human damage in your helmet, and then still evasion chest, Viper's gloves, and you're going to be running anti-resistance crystals in your offhand. Right now I went with ignore grapple, but it can be any of the four, depends on what you need for your class. And then of course Aldocus and Elkas. I threw in another build. I know a lot of players enjoy this one. This is also very good if you're grinding human damage mobs, such as Bloody Monastery at Endgame. This one is also a great setup for large-scale PvP if you're playing like a ranger or archer or something like that. And it's all-out damage. We got the Aldocus, we got the Elkas, and here it changes a bit. We are running red battlefield crystals in your boots, in your helmet, in your chest, but not in your gloves. We still run the Vipers in the gloves. They add a lot of value, and that 40 accuracy is super valuable. You can check out my accuracy guide in the description. Play around with some numbers. You can run human damage in gloves, but after looking at numbers myself, it's very, very rare that it would be worth using over the Vipers. And then in your offhand, now we're going full glass cannon, we're going full damage. Corrupted crystals in the Nuver. You can also run the red battlefield, the red spirit crystal for more human damage. But in general, the corrupted are going to be the better pick. For the evasion setup, we again have a pure PvE build starting off, and we go with the Hooms in the chest, Vipers in the gloves. Even for evasion, you still need the accuracy to hit the mobs. And here's one of the things with evasion that's a bit interesting. You're going to be running Kudum both in PvE and in PvP. So for PvE, you pretty much always want to be running corrupted crystals, but when we go over into the PvP builds, you'll probably be running corrupted crystals as well, because you don't have the luxury of mixing and matching. But for pure PvE, no question about it, corrupted crystals in your offhand and your awakening weapon, glorious AARKs, they are glorious. And of course, Elkas in main hand and Hooms in boots. And here's the one gem that makes the builds very different from DR and Evasion. The Jinn Harpiers in your helmet. They are absolutely mandatory for any Evasion builds. They will be in every single one of these builds you'll see. You always want to be running the 20 Evasion. If you can't get the Jinn Harpiers, the ones can work. Otherwise, you got a 20 Evasion Agility Crystal here. But this one is absolutely mandatory for Evasion builds. Going into the PvP cookie cutter build, we again are running the Harpiers. I'm just going to ignore them on the rest of the builds. They're there on every single one. As soon as we're going into PvP builds, we're looking for the special evasion in chest. It's an absolutely amazing crystal. It can be the blue version all the way up to Jinn if you can get them. It is the best. Still, we're going to be running Viper, and in offhand, still corrupted, whereas in the DR build, we were running a different crystal for survivability. We don't really have that luxury in an evasion build. And we're going to switch over to the Aldocus in your awakening weapon, Elkas, and in boots, we're now running Adamantites. If we're doing a build with no Adamantites and no Aldocus crystals, we get a very balanced all-around build. So this might be an option for you as well if you value survivability a bit more than offensive pressure, which is very likely since you're already building tanky with evasion. So now we're running Hooms in your boots, still Harpiers in helmet, still special evasion in chest, Vipers in gloves, Corrupted in Offhand, but we're running the Whooms in Awakening, so Awakening and Boots with Whooms, and Elcars in Gloves. I made a more sturdy survival real bruiser build where you again value survivability even higher, and it really depends on what it is you want out of your build with the crystals. But if you're building Evasion, there's a good chance that you care a lot about survivability. Some classes more so than others, but I made one just in case you want to up your survivability a bit more. We're going to be running the Whooms in Boots, Harpiers in Helmet, Evasion, Vipers in Gloves, but now we're switching over to Rebellious Crystals in the Offhand. The Rebellious Crystal in Offhand is a pretty okay PvE crystal as well. It gives 5 AP, but also 5 monster AP. So it is weaker than the Corrupted in pure PvE, but if you want to get that extra notch of HP in PvP, this is an amazing crystal for that, and the loss in PvE is acceptable. So it is definitely an option if you want to build a more sturdy build. And now we're still going to be running the Whooms. We are already valuing survivability over damage, so we'll take the loss of the Ulukers to make sure we get the 4 Whoom set bonus. Of course, we needed to make an Ignore Resistance build as well, and we are going to be running Adamantites, Harpiers, Spatial Evasion, Vipers, Ignore Resistance in Offhand, and again, depending on what you need, you'll be running that. A lot of the times, Ignore Resistance for Grapple is a great one. I wouldn't run it on, say, a Warrior, because we already have that innately in our class, but some classes don't. And it can really hurt you if you have a grab. But Knockdown is another very, very useful Ignore Resistance crystal. We're going to go Ulukers and we're going to go Elcars. Finally, I made a full tank build as well. I know there are some players out there that are playing DP memes in Endgame. It's going to be an Evasion style build, so I just threw this in there as well, just in case there was somebody wondering about it. For a full tanky, full DP build, I would go Adamantites, I would go Harpiers, of course Special Evasion in chest, and I would go Whooms in Gloves. At this point here, you got no real AP, your accuracy doesn't really matter, you're there to stay alive, you're there to be annoying, and you're there to be disruptive of the enemy players. So definitely valuing survivability above all else, and Whooms in Gloves helps with that. In the Offhand, we're going Rebellious as well, and of course Whooms in Awakening, but still Elcars in main hand. You want to land that CC while you're staying alive. There you go. Hopefully you found this helpful. The link to both these builds, the DR and the Evasion, is going to be in the description down below. So you can click those links and you can check them out. And hopefully you'll find something you'll need. See you next time.